Well, hello. It's been a bit of a fraught morning here. We'll see how much of me staring at the screen you have to look at before I actually go live. My name's Jeff. Thank you for joining me for a sort of monthly live stream. We're having internet connection issues here, so hopefully everything will go smoothly. We do this once a month to kind of check in. You can use the chat. The chat should be live. Nothing has popped up yet. It's asking me to learn more, but I don't want to learn. There we are. David Walsh. Good morning. Always a pleasure to hear from you, sir. But anyways, drop your questions in the chat. I will get to them. I will get to as many as I possibly can in the next hour of time. Thank you for joining us. Let's see what we've got. So good morning. Good morning. I have a question about singing diphthongs in a sustained vowel in the word today. Would you recommend singing the A, or A? Is there a rule? Kind of. In as much as that rules there are always exceptions. In general, for standard phonation, like in your vocalizations, for example, if you're practicing, then you would want to stay out of the diphthong. So instead of singing today, where I've changed it, I've sung through the diphthong, today, and then use it to finish the phrase. That being said, you will regularly hear artists, particularly in the popular genres, using diphthongs to kind of give a different flavor to things. They may use it sort of artistically to give their phrases a different feel. So the rule in general, stay out of the diphthong, subject to your own artistic predispositions, but particularly in choral singing, or when you have a group, choral or not, just a group of vocalists together, having a well-defined rule around how you're going to deal with diphthongs, very advisable. I hope that answers your question. Further to that end, I might add, before I move on, that staying in the vowel will be particularly helpful if you're in the zona di passaggio or at the secondo passaggio. Changing through that diphthong can change the profile, the coordination, the configuration of the vocal fold and the column of air, and that can lead to, anything basically happening in the zona di passaggio, where you go out of tune or lose phonation or something to that effect. Great question. Love it. Love it. Good morning, Mr. Rolka. Good morning to you. Jeff is perfectly fine. Jeff is good. Thank you for your amazing videos. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today, this morning, or whatever time it may happen to be where you are in the world. Thank you. Is there a different tongue positions for singing? Excellent question. When you have consonants, then it is advantageous to have as much flexibility of the tongue as possible so that you can articulate a T, for example, and then quickly get back into a neutral position or get on to the next position that may be coming up in the next word with the next set of consonants. However, in the vocalizations of your vowels, what you may notice over the singing of those 5 cardinal vowels is that the rear of the tongue will go from being quite elevated in the rear of the oral cavity to a little bit lower, to a little bit lower, to a little bit lower. The trick is to not allow it to descend too much too soon. So frequently we can get a lot of motion between E and A and Ah, and it's too much. And so we lose a lot of resonance around the voice. And what we end up doing is trying to push on it to get that resonance back, which is ultimately self-defeating. In those vocalizations, however, try to keep the tip of your tongue just lightly resting. If these are your front bottom teeth, then keep the tip of the tongue. This is the tip of the tongue. Keep the tip of the tongue just lightly resting by those front bottom teeth. That's a really, really good place to start. Again, once you get consonants, so if you're singing lyrics, once you get consonants involved, we want to be flexible with the tip of the tongue. We want to be able to move and do different things with it, articulate different consonants, stuff like that. But in general, in vocalizations, tip, lightly touching bottom front teeth, rear, flexible, allowed to shift positions to accommodate different vowels. I have a question about how to hold up on a note and control breathing, question mark. Oh, I lost it. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay. I would love to address that question. Could you be more specific? Can you hop into the chat again if you wouldn't mind, please? Be a bit more specific. You know, holding a note is a lot like, we don't hold notes. I mean, we might sustain a pitch, but I like the word sustain better because I can hold a note on a piano by not taking my finger off of it. But the vast majority of the effort happened there. And I'm not doing very much at all here. For us as vocalists, the longer that we sustain a pitch, the longer we are increasing our effort around maintaining that pitch. So we have a beginning, we have a middle. The sustain requires a constant re-engagement of that energy. And if we think about holding a note, which to me says static, it says it's staying in place. I feel like we're coming at it from a fundamentally not ideal way of thinking about it. Sustaining, re-energizing, continuing, those are words that I think are more appropriate for us to reflect upon as vocalists when we are required to sing a pitch for a longer period of time. But maybe, could you please elaborate a little bit more? Increase your range. Again, without knowing your voice specifically, it's hard for me to say, but at the very least, examining the zona di passaggio and examining the secondo passaggio and how to make smooth transitions across it will buy you a perfect fourth pretty quickly. Beyond that, it's going to require a lot more engagement and airflow, but there's still more range to be had there. It isn't so much that you are increasing your range. That range was always latent. In other words, it was always there. It's just how you access it that makes the difference. Caitlin says, I want to learn how to sing. I think that's awesome. I hope that you will learn how to sing. I think, if I may say so myself, there's a lot of videos here that can help you with that. I might suggest you take a look at the beginner playlist, which, especially pointed out here in the live chats, is really more of like a fundamentals playlist. It's not as if we ever outgrow those concepts in that playlist. But the range is more manageable. It's meant to keep you in a narrow part of your overall tessitura so that you can practice with the vowels and the concepts presented in those videos. And then you can move on to the regular warm-up series where you're moving around a little bit more, making use of more of your overall range, your overall tessitura. Jin Jiang says, I'm a tenor, by the way, and is talking to Caitlin. I love it when you all talk within the chat. I think that's so cool. I always say I'm not going to read those out, but I kind of always do. Thank you. I appreciate the accolades regarding the videos here. Brian, you're welcome. Shalala, hello. Let me just represent the other side of the world and say good evening. Happy to catch you live. Hey, thank you for joining us. I think it's getting... what is it, 7-ish, 7 p.m.? Not too late, but certainly not early. Indeed. Good evening to those of you in Europe or England and for parts further beyond. If anyone's from anywhere east of there, by all means, I'd love to hear about it. Alfonso, good morning, Jeff. How do I increase my low end? When singing, I struggle with low notes. Going higher isn't much of an issue. Okay, well, cool. I always hate it when it does that. where blah, 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 blah. There we are. Okay, cool. Yeah, for starters, light and bright. So for example, for me, if I press into my low end, like I'm trying to open up my throat like that, I am going to in fact run out of range sooner than if I approach it from a light and bright standpoint. And later on, as you become accustomed to that neutral larynx position, then you can experiment with increasing the airflow, maybe loosening up the vocal folds a little bit, because of course I'm getting very close to like a vocal fry sound in that area as I get that low. Loosening up a little bit, increasing the airflow, and having, I mean, that's still to me a very full sound for that range of my voice, but other tones, shall we say, as you get accustomed to it. But rarely does it ever get spoken about, but you know, as much as vocalists tend to squeeze up when going for high notes, very frequently vocalists will also try to push down into the larynx for the low notes. And curiously enough, both ways of approaching singing in those respective registers will in fact limit you. It will prohibit you from being able to adequately access those notes in the lower range of your voice. So work towards a neutral laryngeal position. Think light and bright to get started, having a more balanced approach to the muscle engagement around the larynx. And then you can experiment with that as it becomes more natural. Your vowels start to align. You can increase the airflow, maybe release down a little bit, and get some different colors, maybe a little bit more fullness still depending on your FOC, stuff like that. Is it possible to harmonize my falsetto with my guitar? Of course. Can you put music? I'm not sure what you mean by that, Caitlin. Maybe elaborate? Over the, hi Jeff, hello. Edward, hello, hi. I recently realized my tongue is very tight when I sing. Any advice on ways or exercises to relax the tongue, especially the back of the tongue? Yes, there's a couple videos. I do not know the title off the top of my head right now. But there's a couple videos where I ask you to sing the vowels with the tongue way stuck out. In the video, I also talk about grabbing your tongue if it pulls back. The point of those exercises is to do something different. So if you have a lot of tongue tension, step one is to try to do something different so that you can gain a little bit more control over your tongue, and then you can work towards having it be more released in a neutral, more normal singing position. But for starters, grabbing it, pulling it out of your mouth, singing with it, you know, stuck out like that. Eventually the exercises move on to having it just be lightly on the lip. And the giveaway when you're doing these is if you sing it and it draws back without your intending to draw back. So like the point is to keep it on the lower lip or keep it. Yeah, my vowels sound terrible when I sing it like that. But the point is to get the tongue to behave, to do what we want it to do. And then once we've practiced that a little bit, we can move it back to the lip and move it back to a neutral position within the, you know, the mouth and practice that way. That's a start. That would be a start. Finally caught you live, Gigi. Excellent. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Mimi. Hi, Jeff. Mezzo here. Whenever I use chest voice, my throat gets tight, especially when I go higher, even though I don't think I'm straining. So my voice just switches to head because it's more comfortable. Well, I suppose the first question is, if you want to change something about that, you're probably going to have to do something different. That will most likely begin with seeking a different balance in the chest range, the thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice of your range. So if you are a mezzo, that's going to be F4 and below to begin with. And try the short exercises. We. That can give you a very different idea about how you're using vocal fold engagement in that range of your voice. In particular, when you go from a dynamic airflow exercise like that to a melismatic one. If they don't, like I didn't change vowels, right? If they don't sound the same, something's changing. The range hasn't really changed. This is all a very comfortable thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice range for me. So if you hear a difference in the vowel, there I'm obviously squeezing the E vowel. Assuming, so now the dynamic, the short notes, it's easier to get the vocal fold configured in a productive manner. That's why they are such a big part of new vocalist exercises, why I use them so frequently in tonal balancing exercises. Assuming that those are correct, you want the melismatic part of the phrase to match the tone quality and the physicality, the physical feeling of the short notes. And that would be, again, a good place to start. Put music so we can sing. Again, Caitlin, I at the risk of seeming evasive, I really don't wish to be evasive, but do you mean like right now, to do vocal exercises? Because this is really more of a Q&A format. But I'm not opposed. I've thought about it in the past, and maybe you can let me know, those of you who are with me today. I've often thought about maybe doing like a live stream, live vocal warm-up, but I've never done it just because no real reason behind that. Mostly I think it was because I wasn't sure. And now, thinking about it now, having done so many videos that are all voices, I think I could probably do a better job of it now, but I've avoided it in the past because I didn't want vocalists to feel left out, like, oh, he's only in this range, which isn't particularly productive for me. Is that what you mean, Caitlin? Like you want me to do like a vocal warm-up live here? And I, at the risk of disappointing you, I'm probably not going to do that today. Actually, I'm not going to do that today. Because this is meant to be a Q&A session. But if that's what you mean, I'd be happy to try it sometime. I think it's fun. I have thought about it in the past. But let me know. I could be wrong. You are an incredible instructor. Thank you, Christopher. I greatly appreciate it. I do my best to try to earn that with every video I do. How do I increase my resonance as a baritone? I feel like I sing well, but I just don't think it's loud enough as a lower voice. It doesn't quake. I love it. Baritones do have that seismic quality to your voices, don't you? Okay. Resonance is a function of good vocal alignment. Good vocal alignment comes with good vowel alignment as it interacts with your airflow. So, if you want volume, you may have heard me say in the past, volume is the natural consequence of a well-aligned system. So, if you practice your vowels, and you practice that in conjunction with appoggio, so lateral expansion, consistency of engagement, the practice of appoggio, what will occur as you continue your practice is that you will gain greater and greater release of the soft tissue in the oral cavity, such that it will be allowed to resonate sympathetically more with the fundamental pitches you are creating at the vocal fold. The vocal fold alone isn't what ultimately creates these massive sounds. It works in conjunction with the soft tissue and the resonant spaces within the oral cavity and the sinuses and things. So you have to cultivate not only that consistency of vowel alignment and engagement, a good appoggio practice in other words, as well as continued practice to generate as much release of all that soft tissue as possible. That will result in that sound that quakes. So keep up with appoggio, keep on the vowel alignment. I think it's probably advantageous to work in the extremes of the range as well, assuming you've got a good transition across the secondo passaggio. Practicing technique through there just requires so much precision that it has the effect of making your precision greater throughout the overall range of your voice. That's how I'd go about it. Thank you, Dodo. You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Also, whenever I sustain a longer low note, my voice wobbles. If you're very, very low, Mimi, then it could be that you've got a bit of vocal fry going on. It could be that your engagement is not quite as consistent as is required for good sustain. So begin with evaluating that consistency. Yeah, that 9 times out of 10, that's where it's at. Hey Jeff, and this is just a quick just a quick one. What would you say to someone who is scared of making too much noise? More precisely, scared of making mistakes, out of tune, too much strain, etc. Well, that depends a little bit on the situation. Water, coffee. I'm going to pull out an omelet here in a minute. No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. Mistakes happen. We all make mistakes. If it's a recording situation, do it again. That's no big deal. This question is so much bigger than it would appear from its sort of humble presentation, because performance anxiety can be looked at in so many different varieties. So you're scared making too much noise, or more precisely, making mistakes, out of tune, too much strain. If you haven't done your homework before you're performing, well, then making those mistakes shouldn't surprise you. You know, practicing is necessary. Like, that's how we get consistent performances, is by consistent productive practice. So you have to consider that as well. If you're doing your due diligence, if you are practicing effectively, consistently, as best to your knowledge, I would advise getting a third-party opinion of that, or someone else, an objective opinion, just so you know whether or not you're practicing as effectively as you could. Beyond that, then, recordings can help a lot, and maybe setting up, shall we say, low pressure and then increasingly high pressure zones for your performance practice. So I'm also looking at this from a standpoint of performance, as opposed to whether or not you're just concerned in your daily practice. If you're concerned in your daily practice, that's what practice is for. That's where we make mistakes. That's where it's like supposed to be okay to do these things incorrectly. It's not productive when we don't change anything, when we sing out of tune, and then we don't do anything to address it. But if we're talking about performance, you know, you might start by just doing a recording and evaluating it a couple days later. And then you might do a recording and share it with a trusted friend or a professional, someone who can listen critically but give you constructive feedback. In other words, work your way up towards audiences that don't have the language, or for that matter, perhaps the idea that it can be a very vulnerable position to be in sharing a recording or a performance, that you can, you'll then have more confidence to share those things with them and accept their feedback. I have to say, speaking for myself, it took me a long time to be able to gracefully accept the feedback of those who were not musicians, mostly because it requires on our part, it is not on their part, it is on our part to interpret what they are saying. And so it can be very unclear. It's easy to equivocate, to make excuses for why something may sound a different way. Oh, it's not mixed properly. Oh, it's not this, it's not that. But I've found that was perhaps one of the most valuable skills I've learned, because the insight of the person who loves music, or even doesn't love music, but is just listening to it because you asked them to, that insight can be so extremely valuable in interpreting the bigger picture of the music that you're creating. I don't know how much that helps. I feel like I could talk the rest of this session on that and keep on going. I hope that there's a few points in there that you can begin to work with. Selena, question: how do you, as a vocal coach, help a male student whose voice is changing? Focus on things that transcend that adjustment. So appoggio breath management, vowel alignment vowel alignment clear of the zona di passaggio. So most male vocalists, I apologize. Let me take that back. Because voice change is not always, I was thinking of it in one specific instance, but that's not necessarily the only time that voices change. When voices change, stick to areas clear of the typical zona di passaggio locations. So basically, C4 and below would be a good place to stick. You can very effectively work on appoggio, and you can very effectively work on vowel alignment below that point. If there's a lot of fluctuations in the voice, then work on reading music, work on music theory, do some constructive critical listening. You don't have to sing to work on being a musician. And that's really just the very, very beginning. You did, however, in your question state specifically male students. So C4 and below would be a good place to hang out with that individual. Airflow, appoggio, the mechanics of appoggio, understanding vowel alignment. You might dig into pedagogical texts and really take a look at their voice, what it's likely to become. And I would stress to that individual too that there's no point in getting too invested in one FOC over another while that transition's occurring, because until it settles down, which is not likely to occur for some time, speculating on FOC is just speculation. It's just guesswork. David Walsh, the distinction between holding a note and sustaining a pitch is a very useful concept. One of the best things I've learned from you so far. Cheers. Thank you. I appreciate that. Very much so. It is something that I think about all the time. I don't like to, words are important. Let me put it that way. I think that words are important. I have fallen horribly behind, haven't I? I really have. And I've lost David's comment. Where are you? Goodness me, I'm way behind. Okay, I'm going to try and pick up the pace here a little bit. But thank you for that, David. I appreciate it. Also, all of my students use your warm-ups. I'm such a fan. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that, Selena. Thank you. Give my best to them all. Hi, baritone with a break within the usual range. Want to sing mixed voice like Bruno Mars and Brendan Urie. Any advice on exercises for this? I'll tell you what, one of my favorite ones is the trill exercise, and it's in a few videos. I'm probably going to end up doing it in the next daily warm-up that's going to be done in the next week or two. But what I'm talking about is that you know, and coincidentally too, the person who was asking about sustaining pitches or holding notes, that's a really good exercise for that as well. That would be a good place to start for that, assuming that your technique is pretty solid across the secondo passaggio. That's where I would begin. Yeah, I like that exercise quite a lot. And then from there, you can work towards just a straight up. Actually, from there, I would probably then move on to like a 5/6, but holding on the 5. And the thing to do is to try to imagine yourself doing that trill while you're sustaining those pitches. In your mind, you're like, I'm trilling, but you're sustaining. And it's a trick to get you to treat the engagement and the output of airflow like the trill, because those moving passages, we tend to sustain our airflow more effectively there. But when we think we're sustaining a pitch, when we think we're holding a pitch, our airflow tends to become more static, and it's counterproductive. Singing in A minor key and A major key the same? Well, no. I mean, one's major and one's minor, of course. There are going to be different intervals in different places. The tessitura is going to be the same. However, I would suggest that unless you sing in minor tonalities very, very frequently, the lack of familiarity, the disparity in familiarity between major and minor can make the minor tonalities feel a bit more challenging because the intervals that we are expecting are slightly different. And because they are not what we expect, we can be a little bit more tense moving through them. We can have to adjust more frequently, and all of that increases the overall vocal fold engagement, like we're trying to push the pitches around as opposed to being able to release more effectively throughout the duration of the line. So no, if you have to sing in minor tonalities very frequently, indulge in the minor tonality warm-ups. I need to do more of those for the channel, quite frankly. But that would be the thing to do. Familiarize yourself as much as possible with where those, like the layout of the intervals, and also the changes very frequently, particularly in classical music. On descending phrases, you will have the natural minor form of the 6th and 7th scale degrees. So as compared to the major scale, they appear to be flatted, right? So like A descending to E in a minor tonality, depending if it's classical. Now, popular music and different genres will treat this differently, but in classical music, you'll very frequently get A, G, F, E. But on the ascending phrase, it might turn right back around. It can very frequently be E, F sharp, G sharp, A. So those changes too can be very tricky. Not the same, similar of course. Hi from Sweden. Hello. Thank you for joining us from Sweden. I hope you're getting through the dark months of the year effectively over there. How many times a week should I train my voice? For how long? Generally speaking, a good rule of thumb is to vocalize not less than 5 times per week for a duration that is appropriate for your skill level. So if you're a new vocalist, maybe a little bit longer if you have enough to work off of that you know you can be productive. Generally speaking, 15 to 20 minutes is a good rule of thumb. That's why most of my warm-ups fall into that range. In addition to whatever else you're singing. So if you can do vocalizations, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. If you've only got 10, then do 10. You know, just because 15 or 20 is perhaps more ideal, you've only got 10 minutes, do the 10. Do the 5 if that's what you've got. The important thing is to maintain that objective kind of critical look at how you are using your voice, and then move on to your repertoire, frequently where exceptions to rules occur, and it is not as predictable as a major scale is. Different rhythms, different configurations of melodies and things like that can make it much more challenging. From Kent, England, good sir, good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're still there. Lovely. I hope that all is well in Kent. I'm trying to think if I've been down to Kent. I don't know that I have. Hello, Jeff. After puberty, I developed an area between the head voice and falsetto that consistently breaks. I still have this area like 12 years later, and I was wondering if this is a normal thing. Okay. Let me see, you followed up a little bit more. I'm a baritone, by the way. Hey, Jeff, really appreciate your videos on YouTube. One more question. I was also wondering how we develop timbre in our voice, how long it takes to develop. Interesting questions. Wow. Interesting. Okay, so there is a registration event that happens between the head voice, or what I would refer to as the cricothyroid dominant singing voice, and the falsetto range. What happens when you move between these ranges is that the vocal fold goes from being adducted along the entirety of its longitudinal axis, so it's the entire length, right? And then when we switch to the falsetto range, a portion of the vocal fold separates while another portion of it remains adducted or closed. And it's possible that you are, if you're trying to do something in that area, then it's quite likely that the vocal fold could be separating too much, or it could be separating to reconnect, which I think would be less usual. That'd be less typical. My advice is really get into the super lip trill a bit. That exercise where you pull the cheeks apart like this. That is, first and foremost, an excellent exercise for getting an abundance of subglottic air pressure, an abundance of support. The support will help you be more flexible over this transition. What my hope is that do a bunch of super lip trill exercises, like do 2 or 3 scales right in a row with the super lip trill, and then switch to the exercise where you're using some very open vowels like ah and o, and doing the exact same scales or arpeggios, whatever it is, that you did with the super lip trill, and see if that doesn't help. If your technique is good across the secondo passaggio, this is almost always the issue. If it's not good at the secondo passaggio, I'm afraid there's no reason to expect it to be good at the next registration event, that what I've started to call the tertiary registration event, although you won't find that in a textbook. And that is purely to avoid the word falsetto, because it just gets used to mean too many different things, and so it doesn't mean anything any longer. It's confusing. Try that. See what happens. And maybe, leave something in the comments here that I'll see, or leave it in a comment someplace else. I see all the comments for the most part, almost all of them. And maybe we can go from there. Jeff Rolka, many people saying that speaking voice and the singing voice should be the same, but my singing voice uses too much vibrato. And I'm comfortable with, and my speaking voice is higher pitch than my speaking voice. I'm from Philippines, thank you, and good morning. Good morning to you, and thank you too. We use them differently. In the beginning, there are certainly similarities, but the sustained column of air does change how our voice operates to a certain degree. And I would also suggest that typically we do not, quote-unquote, support our speaking voices. I am making a very conscious effort to expand and engage as if I were singing to you right now, because talking for an hour straight is quite taxing, and I have a lot more talking to do today as well. So I'm trying to use my voice in as kind, shall we say, as a kind way as I possibly can. So that being said, sure, here, the sound of my voice there, as compared to my speaking voice, very similar. But I can tell you that it feels a bit lighter when I sing with it because I'm sustaining the column of air, because there's no consonants breaking up the flow of air. It just feels a bit lighter and smoother throughout the duration of that scale than it does even right now, despite my best efforts to try to use my voice as kindly as I possibly can while I'm speaking. So yes, there's absolutely similarities. Are they the same? I don't know that I would entirely go on board with the same, because we do use our voices differently, if for only the fact that we are, in singing, really going to sustain the air column much more consistently than I might if I'm talking to you. Tatiana. Hi, Jeff. I'm a soprano, but I struggle to reach my high notes. I'm a beginner, by the way. I guess it's because I don't have a technique, so I don't know what I'm doing wrong. What can I do? First of all, I would let the high range go for a little bit. I would focus more on appoggio, that's breathing for singing, and vowel alignment in the most comfortable area of your voice. When you have vowel alignment that is consistent there, when you are using good appoggio breath management, then start to explore the higher ranges of your voice. That's when it's going to... trying to go there too soon is too frequently just self-defeating. If your technique is not consistent in the most comfortable areas of your voice, there's so many different things that change over the course of the zona di passaggio, and particularly across the secondo passaggio, that the challenges and the precision of your technique may just not be up to it just yet. And airflow alone can be a big part of that. If you're a new vocalist, focus on appoggio, focus on vowel alignment in the most neutral, comfortable area, expand outwards from there. Ideally, a teacher can help with this. If not that, then a means by which to record yourself so that you can evaluate the sound of your voice. Do that like a day or two after you've done the vocalizations. And I'm not talking about songs. I'm talking about recording your scales. Record a session with a video here. Set it aside for a day and a half, 2 days, then go and check it out. Maybe make some notes. Listen to the sound of the vowels. Are they the same? What sounds like a productive use of your voice? Identify that vowel, and then either find a video that starts with that vowel, that focuses on that one and uses it as an anchor, or sing the same video, but just change the vowels so that that's your anchor vowel. This is another reason why there's so many warm-up videos on the channel, is to try to accommodate the different vowels that different vocalists naturally use effectively. It's not going to be the same for everyone. And so identifying that vowel that for you works really well, that will be a good way to move forward too. Thanks for all your baritone vids. You're very welcome. How many times a week should I train my voice? I kind of already talked about that. 5 days a week, 10 to 20 or 15 to 20 minutes for vocalizations in addition to whatever else you are singing would be a good starting point. You can always watch this afterwards to try to get more of the information. Oh, thank goodness, we finally have liftoff on the old lava lamp. I was worried it wasn't going to be heated up today. My range is C3 to D flat 6. I just want to say thank you working so hard for us, people who love singing. You're very welcome. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. I'm from the Caribbean. It is the afternoon here. Brilliant. So we've got, in the Philippines, it's like the middle of the night from the person who was in the Philippines. So that's crazy. It's amazing. We got Philippines, middle of the night. We've got the Caribbean in the afternoon. We've got Europe getting into the evening. And of course, here on the west coast of the United States, it is late morning at this point. Kelly, I use your videos to warm up every time I sing. Can you tell me how to sing more freely? I do so well by myself, but I tend to overthink when I'm around others. I never sing as well as I do alone. Yeah, you know, there's an old saying that the best performances happen in the practice room. I tend to agree. Some of my most profound performances, I was the lone witness to. I didn't even have a recorder going. This is interesting because it sounds to me like more of a performance anxiety question than it does a vocalization question. But I don't know that for sure. I will say this, first of all, thank you for using the videos to warm up. I appreciate it. I would start, this is going to seem long-winded, I would start by trying to notice what it is that changes and when it changes and why that might be. Is it always just anyone else, or is it specifically certain people? Is it a teacher, or is it just random listeners, or is it other people that you're making music with, if you're fortunate enough to have others that you get to make music with these days? Look at the answers to those questions, I think, will tell you more about what might be necessary. So, yeah, I'm sorry to be so vague about that, but I think you have to start there. Take a look at what's happening. See if you can figure out why you're becoming, why you're overthinking. And I'm reading into that becoming anxious, which may or may not be what's happening. See if those things can give you some insight as to why your performance may be suffering, and then address that. Oftentimes this can mean, you know, doing like a series of very carefully arranged performances. As again, I talked about this earlier, but like going from people who know music, people who don't know music, voice teachers, like finding a safe place to start and then moving outwards from there, so that you can more effectively deal with perhaps anxiety, but also more effectively take the constructive criticism that hopefully you're getting. I don't know if you are or not. Yeah, I hope that helps. There was more. I went into more of this earlier on today. You might, when this becomes just a video, you might go and have a look at that too. Hi Jeff, are you still doing private lessons over Zoom or Skype? I have a limited capacity these days to do consultations when I get cancellations and things like that. So yes, sometimes it can be a little bit of a wait, and I'm sorry about that. But I do try to get people just in as quickly as I can when they want a consultation or a one-off lesson or something like that. The best way to get into that process is to contact me via my website, jeffrolka.com. You can send an email to me through the contact form there, and then we can get it all sorted out. Thanks, Jeff, from Dennis. Thank you. You're welcome. I've been using your tenor warm-ups for years now. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. What is a whistle register? Jazzy lady. It's a very interesting change to the registers of the voice. What happens is the epiglottis partially closes over the vocal fold apparatus, and it literally creates a whistle-like aperture that one can learn to whistle through. I do not really, I've experimented with it, and I'm not going to experiment with it right now because I am pretty bad at it. I can't really create whistle tones in a capacity that I am willing to share here. And I'm normally pretty comfortable with that, but I just don't have much command of any kind over that aspect of singing. The tricky part about it is that because of the way the epiglottis closes over the vocal fold, even with scopes and things like that, you can't actually observe what's occurring. So a lot of it's done by sound creation, feel, things like that. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful with that. Eternals Victor. Jeff Rolke, just wanted to say thank you so much for providing such valuable vocal resources. You're an inspiration. Thank you. I truly, truly appreciate it. Kelly, also, how to find my own personal style of singing. Since I started singing, I have the tendency to sing like the record, and I hate it. I want to sound like me. And there's any number of different things that you can try to do to bring your own voice forward. One, you might try writing songs too. That's just by definition your own doing. They don't have to be good songs. They just have to be a song with a melody, some type of perhaps repeatable refrains, or you could just do a vocalization with a melodic component. That would be something to try. Changing keys to the covers that you're doing can be helpful in exploring your own take. Changing tempo can also be very good. If you feel confident enough to alter melodies, that too can change the way you think about it. The thing to do is to try to sing without that vocalist. If you can accompany yourself, then that's really, really great. Since, like when I do covers, a lot of the exploration of the cover is me exploring the different ways that I'm going to play the instrumental parts to it. I have a cover, I'm going to release it December 23rd, it'll be coming out soon. And I explored all kinds of different aspects of, guitars and piano and samples and loops and things like that before I arrived at a production that I felt suited my style and was going to sit well with the kind of vocal performance that I wanted to do for the tune. If you don't play, then resources like I think it's like karaoketrack.com or karaokeusa.com or something like that. A lot of the karaoke tracks there can let you sort of choose which instruments you want to be part of the texture, and that can, help drive you in a direction that is going to be more of you and less of the original track. That's how I would begin to approach it. I think that spending some time with those covers in those capacities can be really, really, really helpful too. You can just kind of explore your own way of looking at them. But ultimately, if you want to bring your voice forward, writing would be the best way to do that. How many times a week should I train my voice? I've talked about that a couple times. So maybe review that, because I'm going to keep going here. What are riffs and runs? Riffs, runs, melismatic passages, ornamentation, all referring to the same thing, although sometimes I think that runs sound as if they're longer than a riff. They're short little vocalizations that you hear in between the words of a song. In the case of Whitney Houston, oftentimes these were long melismatic passages that she would sing to kind of expound upon the melody. It can be something that's just as simple as a neighbor note. I was there. That's just a neighbor note. That is perhaps the smallest amount of ornamentation one could do on that pitch. I was there. That's a longer riff, very basic in its scope by any definition. And it kind of just gets more and more elaborate from there. Just basically a riff or a run is when a vocalist expounds upon the melody of their song. I presented an admission exam for university in singing. Some people say I'm a baritone, others a tenor. How do I know which I am? Keep going, basically. The more alignment your voice has, the more that the tendencies, the sweet spots in your voice emerge, the more it'll become obvious what your FOC is. Rushing to define your FOC too frequently is self-defeating, because what ends up happening is we say to ourselves, I am this. And then we look that up, say like, oh, well, this is supposed to do this and that and the other thing. And then we do those things, whether or not it's truly best for our voices. Focus on the alignment and the effective use of your voice, observing where registration events are, where you are most comfortable, where things feel more challenging, and what the process of working through those challenges feels like. Your FOC will emerge out of that. And I would suggest to you too that your university professor who will be doing lessons with you will have a lot to say about that. Hi Jeff, thank you so much for your knowledge. How to avoid voice cracks. Also, could you write sheet music for exercises in lessons? Okay, cracks are indications of imbalances. So you have an imbalance in the vocal fold engagement or the subglottic air pressure. So airflow versus the way that the vocal fold is configured. Address that and the cracks will, go away. But that's a complex process, particularly when we're talking about registration events. When you talk about a registration event, you have vowel modifications and a very changing airflow profile that occurs throughout that registration event. If you are not making incremental changes throughout the zona de passaggio, that too needs to be addressed. All of these things need to be addressed. So there's no one how to fix a crack. All of those things need to be looked at in your practice. Could I write sheet music for exercises in lessons? Yes. Am I going to? Not exactly. I have recently upgraded my Rocket book, which is the reusable notepad that I use for the PDFs that I write. It's over there. And those are available to Patreon subscribers. And I'm now going to have sheet music, but I'm not going to write out every single scale that I play in the exercise. The amount of work that would entail is outside the scope of the time that I have available to do it and maintain the kind of release schedule that I maintain. But I am going to start doing an exercise or two to illustrate the timing and the contours of the passage. So, and those are available, like the older ones, which do like range and give a delineation of the exercise in numeric values as well as solfege. Those are all available on Patreon at the sort of, shall we say, kind of, entry-level tier, if you will. I am working on my C5 and C-sharp 5s now, and I recently hit a very strained F5. Is there any way to know if I have a whistle register already? I would suggest that if you do manage to get into whistle tones, you'll know about it, because it's a absolutely different way of configuring the vocal fold and producing pitch than head voice or above the next registration rate in the falsetto range of the voice. Thanks for all your amazing daily sing warm-ups videos, Jeff. You're welcome. Thank you for watching. Thank you for using them. Those are some of my favorite to do. And I need to plan and do one of those this week. It won't be out for a few weeks, but that's what's up. What is the first thing that I should study concerning music and voice theory? I want to improve my voice. Appoggio. That would be my suggestion, the first and greatest. Without that, everything else, you'll get, it'll kind of work. It'll mostly work in a lot of instances, but with Appoggio, things really work. How many times a week should I train my voice? Again, did talk about that before. Yes, this will be live after streaming 15 to 20, 5 days a week in addition to your regular singing. Jeff, hello Dennis. It would be cool. Cool. It's nearly 11 o'clock here in California. I'm so sorry I'm not going to be able to get to all your questions today. I do love doing these live events. I hope that you've been able to get some information here. This is going to be just a regular video once it's done processing. So if there are things that I went quickly on, you can go back and review them. And for those questions, I did go quite specifically into the whole practice regimen thing, which seems to be like a theme today. Really cool. Anyways, thank you so very much for joining me today. I'm so sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions. I'll be back in January with a live event, but again, I'm about due for another community community questions video where I post on the community thingy, and then you can put your questions there. So if you are subscribed and you do get notifications, you should be notified when I post that request for questions. And then if I've missed your question here, hopefully you can get it there and I can address it in that format. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being a part of the community and being a part of the channel. I really, really appreciate it. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing. Hopefully we'll see you either again here next month in the live event, or on community questions, or in the comments somewhere on the channel with some singing. Thank you so much. Bye.